Welcome to our podcast, and we will be discussing our career path as well as our secondary career path as well. So, first off, let's start by introducing our members. My name is Sanso Vitu.
My name is What?
My name is Richard.
My name is Tanat.
My name is Bungo.
So that is the introduction of our members. So let's start off by discussing our career path by starting off with primary career. So what are your first and primary career that you want to work for?
About my primary career, I want to be a game developer. Because I really like to play games, especially about the game that is about the RPG.
Right.
And growing up, I play a lot of games, especially MMORPG. And in the future, I would like to create my own game and also want to develop or implement the idea that I want to add in that game.
Right, that's a nice idea.
It's the same as him.
Same as Munlong.
Yeah, same as Mulong. Because I play a lot of game from the kid.
Right, when you play a lot of games, you get a lot of idea from those. What about Richard?
Pretty much the same thing, but for me, my inspiration would come from more specific types of games. So I played a lot of different types, and the main ones that I'm interested are the ones that are difficult to play. So you would think Doom Eternal or Ultra Kill, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
They're really like shooting game.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Gory. So what about you?
Mine's mostly the same, but it was more on like curiosity. Like back then, whenever I played games, I always thought, wow, how did they do this? How did they, like, from a block of code made a character do this by themselves?
Right. That's a great choice as well. Well, for me, it's the same as well as game development. I also play a lot of game, and by playing lots of game, I also like have a lot of ideas that I want to further create my own game with those ideas that I've played. All right, so moving on. So in order to achieve your primary goal, so in order to do that, what are the first steps to be able to achieve those goals?
Okay, in order to become a game developer, we need to create a roadmap. And for the first step in our roadmap, we need to understand the basic. For the phase one is the basic development. On this phase, we need to understand about the game engine and programming language. For the game engine, we can choose Unity because it is a beginner-friendly and also support for 3D and 2D game. And there is also an Unreal Engine that we can use because it is a high-quality graphic and often used in the AAA company.
Right.
And there is also a game engine called Godot, and it is a open source lightweight and used full for beginner. And for the programming language, we can use C# that is primarily used in the Unity. There is also C++ that are used in Unreal Engine. We can use GDScript if you want to use the Godot engine, and also Python because Python is often used for scripting and prototyping.
Right.
And moving on, we need to understand about the math and physics in the game. This is a basic math and physics. And for the math, we need to understand about trigonometry, and it is essential for rotation and angle for the asset in the game. And there is also vector and matrix that are used for the transformation, movement, and lighting in the game. There is also linear algebra that used for 3D scaling and rotation of the environment that we can use or we need to create in our game. And there is also algebra that used to calculate the movement of the object or the NPC in the game. For physics, we need to understand about friction and drag that is used to see or to create a movement for the asset. There is also gravity and acceleration that is used for jumping and falling mechanics. And there is also force and momentum that are used for object interaction, and also collision detective so that it will prevent objects to collide with each other and it's not passing through each other. Now moving on, phase 2 is about building simple game. After we study or after we understand about those knowledge, we need to test our skill. by trying to building a simple game like Pong or Flappy Bird. And you can also try to build a platformer game like jumping, and also at the enemy level you can try a simple RPG mechanic like basic inventory, and also shooter game like bullet and movement. That's all. Now moving on to the third phase.
Yep. So as Manong mentioned, like to develop a game, we don't like programming is also a part of it, but a really big part of game development also comes into math and physics as well to further help develop the game into a really more realistic and better games. All right. So moving on to phase 3. Phase 3 is intermediate development. So as Bonlong has mentioned on the phase 2, where we can create games like simpler games like jumping games as well as flapping birds that you have mentioned. So in order to create those games, we have to put all our knowledge that we have from programming, math, and physics into those. So for example, the first one is game AI as well as pathfinding, where like finite state machine. It really we can control the enemy behavior as well as the AI in the game, also the NPC to act accordingly to how we want. And second is the ray casting as well as collision algorithm. So this really help detect the objects in 3D environment, which further improve the environmental and gameplay of our games. And also AI and pathfinding, so algorithm for AI movement. So moving to advanced math and physics. So like what Long mentioned, math and physics is really essential and really important for game development. So what is math and physics role in this? So for example, kinematics and dynamics. So this really helps evaluate the motion equation for realistic movement. Second is projectile motion. So bullets, arrow, thrown objects, those are related to physics on how those has to move in certain ways. And the third point is center mass and torque. So it really helps balances the object as well as the rotation. For example, like the wheel of the cars and how the airplane is supposed to move as well. So the fourth is rotational motion, which, as I've mentioned, like vehicle wheels and spinning objects are also related to center of mass as well. And lastly is rigid body physics, to really show how human body is act accordingly to situations. So for example, if they were to get shot, so how are they able to like move accordingly to the situations? And onto the second point of phase 3 is game asset and UI UX. So use free assets. So have anyone here used any free assets? No? Alright, so for example, free assets. First one is Kenny. It uses a really high quality 2D and 3D assets. For example, like sound effects and environmental objects, as well as it's free as well. So second one is itch.io. So it is a platform for free and paid game assets. So it really has a wide range of styles and assets to it. Third one is open game art, which is free and also community driven. So a lot of people really helps other people that are in need of research for game development. So open games art is really important as well to the community that later on wanted to be a game developer. So moving on is learning the basic 2D art for 3D modeling. So first one is Sprite. So it's really essential for creating pixel art, which is commonly used in 2D games. Second is Blender. It is a free for modeling. It is a free software for modeling, texturing, and also animating 3D objects, which is perfect for creating a game environment and characters. Don't you guys agree? Yeah. Have you heard of Blenders? Yeah, it's really popular. And third one is Photoshop. So Photoshops are usually used for like posters, game posters, when games are about to publish. And also GIMP, which is also a alternative for Photoshops as well, which pretty much used for poster and 2D textures for games. So this is the end of phase 3 and moving on to phase 4.
So for phase 4, it's about advanced topics and specializations, and for the first point, it's about implementing like multiplayers and networking.
Right.
As we see from today's game, there might be a lot of single players that's been popping up, but multiplayers are rising very rapidly.
They're still popular.
Yeah, they also the one that maintains popularity. Like most single player games, they would rise up and then they would just dip down very fast.
That's true.
But for multiplayers game, they have consistency.
Yep.
Their popularities rise up and then it might go down, but it stays consistent enough for it to last longer. So with games like Helldivers 2, and then the new one Split Fiction,
Yep.
you can see a lot of popularity rise up based on just being multiplayer alone. And there's also improvements to performance and optimization. Of course, the game might be good, but if it performs bad,
No one would play it.
no one would play it. How bugs or something Ubisoft games nowadays.
Lots of bugs.
Yeah, they will release something, they will have a lot of bugs in it, and then no one will play it again. And also with how graphics been improving lately, there's more of demand for more realistic graphic or just better graphic in general.
That's true.
With games I don't know, Elden Ring.
Elden Ring, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd see this majestic, big, beautiful art that's actually in the game. That is not a picture. It's just graphics alone.
Right.
So we would have to somehow top that, which is why the demand for graphics now suddenly increased a jump.
That's true. Gamers now really needs a really good graphics.
Yeah, they would complain a lot if the
Graphics are bad.
If the graphics are bad, how in animations, or cartoons, animes, even though the show is good, if it looks bad, some people might just run away from it.
Right, it's a turn off for some people. Right. So moving on to phase 5, which is final game project demonstration. So Mr. Richard.
So for phase 5, we have final game projects and demonstrations. So for 2D, it would be like we discussed before. We're playing around with a 2D field, so the game would have to be a lot more stylized. It would be simpler. You would have to focus on less mechanics, but you will have to put more thought and more effort into things such as puzzle mechanics or strategy.
Right.
Of course, you can still have combat mechanics, but it's a lot less versatile. So then that's when you move on to 3D projects. So now you're working around with a lot of different factors. You're having the physics and mechanics, the logics that we discussed before, but now you're also having to work with perspectives, camera angles. When you're working with large world models or open world games and RPGs, you're going to have to figure out not only how multiplayer networking works, but you're also going to have to put thought into how you're going to achieve good graphics for one.
Right.
But you're also going to have to work on how it works in multiplayer. So everyone experiences the same thing. You would have to optimize the game for latency and lag.
Right.
But also performance. So you have to figure out how to make the world look good graphic-wise, make it look stylized and good, while also not exploding your computer.
Yep. So we just keep it adding on the complication and the complexity to it.
Yeah.
Right.
You also have to keep in mind that not everyone has the same specs.
Yeah,
as
that's
others.
true.
For the 2D project, we can create a platform game such as Super Mario, something like that, and for the 3D project is we can create an open world RPG like GTA 5,
Okay.
Honor of King,
Honor of King.
like mobile game,
Mobile
Oh,
game,
mobile
right.
game.
and a lot of more like
Lot.
Civilization, like Sim 4 or the new type sim like
New
just
sim.
create.
Right. Yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so like Bong Panet has mentioned, like 2D games has a limit to it, where we can really express or want to show the game how like we really want it to be. Pretty much on 2D, where 3D we have a lot of more creativity, and we can work like around it a lot more as well. All right, so moving on. So we move on to the gearing technology that are pretty much the first part. We will be discussing like the minimal requirement for being a game developer or as well as developing games. So Bonlong, can you run it down?
Okay, for PC requirement or for the gear and technology that game developer choose personally or for the minimal requirement, we need to have a Intel i7 Gen 13, which is very is a enough GPU or power for game dev, and there is also on the GPU we choose to have a RTX 4060. It's quite powerful, even it's not powerful as the latest generation, but it is enough.
Yeah, it's good
And
enough.
yes, it's good enough. And there is also on the RAM, we should have about 32 gigabyte of RAM, because game dev need a really powerful or need to stabilize the processing.
Processing like the task.
Yeah, something like that. For the RAM, you need to have at least 32 gigabyte of RAM because in game development, the computer or your PC need to processing the task and need to stabilize it. And there is also the storage. For the minimum, you should have around 512 gigabyte of SSD and 1 terabyte of HDD. And also the motherboard. For me, I would build a B660, and for the power supply, I would choose around 750 watt. And of course, for the cooling on the PC, I will choose air cooler. And for the case, I will choose what is the cheapest or can put my gear in it. For peripheral gear on the monitor, I will choose dual monitor to multiple tasking, and also it should have around 27-inch and 1440 resolution.
Right.
For keyboard and mouse, I should have mechanical and precision keyboard and also mouse because it help on tasking and easy to write. There is also a drawing terminal that used to help integrating 2D or 3D asset in the game.
Right.
And of course, in order to create this game, you need to have a software or tool in your PC. For the game engine, as I already said, you need to have Unity, you need to have Godot and Unreal Engine.
Right.
For code editor, there is also Visual Studio and Rider that help on coding and also debugging the game.
Yep.
For graphic tool, there is a lot of variety like Photoshop, Chip, Render, Sprite that help developers to create their asset in the game. And for the version control or for collaboration, there is also website called GitHub or GitLab or Git that used for project management and also to share your file to each other.
I see. Yep. So like Monlong have mentioned, for the essential and the peripherals for the technology for to be a game dev, it's not cheap. Let's think about it. It's pretty expensive to be a game developer. So these are just the minimal requirement as well. And let's move on to the recommended requirements.
So for the recommended parts, we'd obviously want to deck out our desktop, right?
Right.
So for the CPU, we go with an Intel i9 13900K, which would cost us up to about like $600. Then
Damn, that's a lot.
yeah.
There are a lot.
Then we have the GPU RTX 4070 Ti. So with this, we'd want to go with something like at least 12 gigabytes of VRAM, because obviously you're doing a lot of rendering. And then we have RAM, 64 gigs by the minimum. The reason why we go with 64 gigs is because from a lot of what software developers say, it's that even with 64, you're still going to run out of them while rendering. In software and game development, being able to manage your time, optimize efficiency is really important. So obviously you want to have a lot of RAM. And of course for storage, we'd go with something like a Samsung 990 Pro, 2 terabytes. That's self-explanatory. However, things regarding like power supply, cooling, or the case. For the case and power supply, you don't have to worry about them too much as long as the case works. Power supply, just go with an 850 watts. Easy as that. Make sure it doesn't overheat. Make sure it has proper cooling and it can properly supply power to your build.
That's a great advice.
Yeah. And one thing to mention about the GPU is that you're getting it for rendering purposes. It's one thing a lot of young developers forget is that you have to optimize your game. So when you're using like a top of the line GPU, you have to also keep in mind that you're optimizing the game for lower end builds for like laptops. Yeah.
Okay.
And then for a monitor, we have like dual monitors, 32 inches, at least 4K. That would round us up to like $400. Again, it's cost a lot. While keyboard and mouse, not much changes. Go with a mechanical keyboard with a precision mouse. And for a drawing tablet, you want something good, of course. So we go with a trusted brand, something like a Wacom 1 or an XP pen, which could round you up to $150. Well, software and tools, they don't really change much. You're still using the same software, the same tools for everything.
Right. Yeah, so as Richard has said, so the recommendation like core parts for being a game dev, it really helps like improve for rendering as well as developing our games without meeting or running into troubles. All right, so
it was pretty expensive though.
yeah, it was expensive.
That's
not
why
free.
that's why there's a minimum requirement.
Yep. All right, so that's it for the recommended requirement for being a game developer. So moving on to our courses, our Paragon courses that you guys think are relevant in order to be a game developer. So for me personally, I think it's MIS 120 because of the fact that MIS 120, it teaches us about the basic general knowledge of how computer works, the internet, and as well as how our society is moving like towards the digital world. So in learning those stuff, it really helps you learning as well as knowing like the technical skill in order to run a network for a for a server or a multiplayer games. Yep, it like helps us runs a multiplayer server.
Okay, and there is also Math 131, that is a calculus one. And as we already studied it, we can see that Math 131 help us to understand about the acceleration, about the speed, velocity, and we can apply it in our game, like what we call about horse or the speed of something.
Yep.
And there is also Math 241 that is teach us about linear algebra. And as I already said, linear algebra is very useful for 3D scaling, for rotation in the game, especially for 2D and 3D game.
Yep. I see. Alright, so
There's also like CS 125, which it teaches us like the basics of coding, like C++, which is used as a basics for almost every other language.
right.
It also teaches like efficient coding, like OOP, for example, object-oriented programming. Then after the basics, there's also like specific classes or course, like the CS 342,
Right.
which is based on artificial intelligence. Because like nowadays AI is being big,
Yep.
it's getting bigger, and we have to learn about it. there's also AI even in like game development too since the beginning, because in every NPC enemies, even like allies NPCs,
Yep.
they all have AI.
They're pretty much AIs.
Yeah, pretty much AI, and the pathfinding is just like the AI trying to adapt to find a way to the players itself.
Right.
So we have to learn about AI and to cover those algorithms to make the NPCs and enemies
Like make the NPCs enemies more smarter.
more smarter.
Right. Right. So moving on, Richard.
In my opinion, I have two choices, which would be CS 311 and 315, which are software design and discrete math. The reason why I choose these two is that software design is obviously very important. You're designing software to be used, so you need to understand how to do like game architecture efficiently in order to avoid spaghetti code. It's a normal thing in the industry, even in like animation. Companies, they develop softwares all the time just for like specific things, specific processes. And so of course software design in this case would be useful just in general. Then there's also discrete math, which is typically a required course all throughout CS as a whole. It teaches you like mathematics on how to, it trains your brain on how to understand AI logic so that you know how to do procedural generations or like game algorithms.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a good point. And moving on to multi-net.
I think I will choose CS for choosing is cloud computing. It has cloud-based network useful for multiple player online game.
Okay.
Right. All right. So now that we've discussed the courses that are important to our career path, so now moving on to our secondary career path. What if like our primary or our first career path, like being a game developer, doesn't work out due to like, as we all know, game developing is not big here in Cambodia. So if it doesn't works out, what are your secondary choice? So let's start off with Bun Long.
Okay, if that didn't work out, my secondary choice would be software developer. So other than game, I will choose to be a software because as game, I want to understand more about software, about the engineering behind it.
Right.
How is it going to work? How is it going to build? And someday I would like to create my own software that useful or it is very useful or very helpful for me because sometimes when I portrait or something or some software about the app or some about the web site in the Google, I have an idea or I want to implement the idea into it, but because I didn't know about anything, I could not do it.
Right.
But if I become a software developer, so maybe sometime can put my idea into that system.
I see. That's a good point. So moving on to multi-net, what is your second career path?
My second career path is going to for app developer. So I want to make app like Chinese app. More of Chinese app is everything in one app. Like,
Right.
Like Alipay or something.
I
So
see.
I want to create that kind of app so we can use only one app, can use a lot of function and make life easier.
Okay. So moving on to Richard.
Me personally, I think I would go into something in like 3D modeling or 3D design because it's a lot more creative of a field, but also understanding how game development works. I would of course have an understanding of how the inner workings of whatever program I'm using works. Not only that, but if it still doesn't work out, I could just go into VFX, which intertwines not only 3D modeling, but also in turn, I'm working with physics in the same way I would in game design.
Right. That's a good point. And for me personally, I would want it to be a backend for a website developer, because as we all know, like backend developer, we deal with a lot of more datas, instead of like interfacing. So I'm really into that, like having to manage data and directing users to certain links or websites, and that's me personally. I'm into that. So yeah, moving on.
For me personally, like if game development didn't work, I would choose cybersecurity because like
Want to be a hacker?
well, part of it, yeah.
Oh my.
Just like the idea of ethical hacking,
Right.
and also like protecting people from hackers. But mainly it's because it's mostly just involved programming, which is what I'm most interested in, because like the problem solving part of it, like you can look for invulnerabilities and stuff. Like check for problems, and then after you solve it, you get like an ecstasy afterwards.
Right.
Stuff like when you find an error in the code, and then you finally fixed it, and then you have the feeling of like, oh wow, it actually works.
You achieve something.
Yeah. Just like the feeling of solving the problem, and then there's also like it's the job stability, like because it's in high demand.
Yeah, that's true. Really high demands right now.
And also it's constantly evolving as well. Like there's always gonna be hackers, cheaters in games and stuff.
Yeah, everywhere.
So yeah, that's about
That's
it.
it?
Yeah,
That's
that's about it.
Alright, so we have expressed and also show our opinion on everything that we want it to be if our primary goal doesn't work out. So I guess this is the end of our discussion as well as our podcast. And any last words? No? Alright, so I guess this is it. Bye! Bye everyone.